The lavender by my first client's front walk had been in the ground 11 years when I finally knelt down and looked at it honestly. From the street it passed for a silver mound. Up close it was a fist of bare grey wood, thick as broom handles, twisted like driftwood washed up on a beach, with all the living green pushed out to the very tips of the branches. For 3 weeks in July it carried a thin fringe of purple bloom, and the bees still came. The other 11 months it sat there looking like something the tide left behind. And if you have a lavender like that in your own front bed right now, a plant you have loved for a decade and quietly neglected for most of it, I want you to hear me out before you reach for the spade. The two choices you think you have are not the only two choices. There is a third one, and almost nobody talks about it. But first, the trap, because you are caught in a real one and pretending otherwise would be doing you no favors. Somewhere along the way you heard the one rule everybody hears about lavender: never cut into the bare old wood. And I need to tell you, as someone who ignored that rule exactly once, about 30 years ago, on a hedge of lavender I had planted myself and was very proud of, the rule is true. Lavender almost never regrows from a leafless woody stem. The buds that become new shoots come from stems that still carry green, and only from stems that still carry green. When I sheared that young hedge back hard into the grey wood, one enthusiastic spring, thinking it would thicken up the way a boxwood does, most of it simply sat there. Bare sticks in a raised bed all season. A few plants pushed a reluctant tuft or two near a surviving leaf. The rest never came back at all, and I spent that autumn digging out my own handiwork and learning humility by the barrowload. So the rule stands. And the rule is exactly what traps you. If the plant cannot regrow from bare wood, and your plant is mostly bare wood, then the usual advice funnels you into two doors. Door 1. Prune and pray. Trim the green fringe carefully every year. Keep the old thing groomed and accept that the bare grey skeleton underneath will only get longer and barer with time. Door 2. Dig and replace. Lever the old root ball out of the bed. Drive to the garden centre and buy a young plant in a plastic pot to drop into the hole. Plenty of garden writers will tell you door 2 is simply what you do with old lavender. Treat it as a short-lived shrub. Enjoy your decade. Dig it out. Start over. And look, if you want purple flowers this summer and no waiting, that advice is not wrong. But it always sat badly with me, and I suspect it sits badly with you, or you would not still be watching. Because that particular plant earned its place a long time ago. It is the lavender you brushed against every June for 10 years on the way to the mailbox. The scent on your fingers after deadheading it is a specific scent, that plant scent, and the replacement in the plastic pot does not have it. Digging out a living thing you love because a rule says it cannot renew itself feels like giving up. As it turns out, you do not have to. The third door is called ground layering. And what it does, in plain terms, is persuade your old lavender to grow its own replacements while it is still standing in the bed. The principle is centuries old, and working lavender farms still use it today, row after row, because it costs nothing and it works on the kind of tired woody plants you and I are talking about. Inside the bark of a lavender stem there are cells that can change careers. Scrape a shallow wound into that stem, no surgery, and hold the wounded section against moist soil, and those cells convert into roots, not metaphorically, actual white roots, growing out of the side of a branch that was waving around in the air a season earlier. And the branch does all this while it is still attached to the mother plant. That detail is the whole magic of the method, so let me slow down on it. When you take a cutting, you sever a piece of stem and ask it to grow roots on its own, racing against the clock while its stored water runs out. Cuttings from a vigorous young lavender win that race often enough. Cuttings from an old woody specimen struggle because tired wood roots slowly and the clock does not care. A layered branch never enters the race. It stays plugged into the mother's root system the entire time, drawing water and food through the stem while the new roots form at their own pace underneath. Nature runs the life support, which is why layering succeeds on old woody lavender where cuttings from the same plant so often fail. And here is the detail that convinced me, decades ago, that this was not some fussy nursery trick. Lavender layers itself. Walk any old planting and you will eventually find it. A low branch that flopped over onto the soil years ago got half buried by mulch or a kicked molehill and quietly rooted where it touched. I found my first one by accident in that same client's border, a rooted branch hiding under the skirt of the mother plant, a complete young lavender that nobody planted. The method I am about to teach you is nothing more than doing on purpose, in the best three spots, what the plant already does by accident in random ones. Now, before the knife comes out, let me make the case for why this beats a trip to the garden centre, because it is a stronger case than it first looks. A layered plant is a clone, not a look-alike, an exact genetic copy of your old plant. Same flower colour, same mounding habit, same scent. And if you have grown lavender long enough, you know the scent varies plant to plant more than the labels admit. Seed will not give you that. Lavender is worked hard by bees, and seed from your garden can carry pollen from any lavender in the neighborhood, which means seedlings drift in color, in size, in fragrance, into something that is almost your plant, but not quite. This is why lavender growers associations tell their own members to propagate by cuttings or layering rather than seed when staying true to type matters. The professionals who make their living from these fields do not trust seed to reproduce a plant they love. Neither should you. There is a second advantage too, one the plastic pot at the garden centre can never offer. A layered plant establishes in the exact bed where it will spend its life. Same soil, same drainage, same afternoon sun, same winter wind. It never suffers transplant shock from a nursery greenhouse to your front yard, because it was never anywhere else. It is born at home. So that is the why. Now the how, and the how starts with a number. 3. Walk out to your woody lavender and study it from above, the way you would look down on the spokes of a wheel. You are hunting for 3 branches, the longest, lowest, and most flexible ones on the whole plant, ideally spread around the crown, one reaching east, one south, one west, whatever the plant gives you, so the new plants end up distributed around the old one rather than piled on one side. Each branch must be able to reach open soil and lie against it without snapping. So test them gently with your hand before you commit. Old lavender wood is brittle, and a branch that cracks at the base is a branch out of the program. And each one needs healthy green growth at its tip, because that green tip is the future plant. Grey wood in the middle is fine. That is the section going underground. Green at the end is not negotiable. Why 3 and not 1? Because practitioners who work this method on old woody lavender learn the number the honest way. Not every layer takes. We will put real odds on that before we finish. But for now, understand that 3 attempts on one mother plant is the insurance policy built into the method itself. 1 layer is a hope. 3 layers is a plan. And an old established lavender, even a tired one, has the root system to feed 3 layers at once without strain. You are not weakening her by asking, do all 3 the same day while your nerve is up, and the afternoon is yours. A word on timing before your knees hit the dirt. The window for setting layers runs from spring, once hard frost is behind you, through early summer, and conveniently that is the same season you would be out with the shears anyway. Set your layers then, and the buried sections get an entire warm growing season of workable soil in which to make roots, which is when lavender wants to make them. A layer pinned down in October mostly just sits in the cold ground waiting for April, so if autumn is when you are watching this, mark the job on the calendar for spring and spend the winter choosing your 3 branches from the kitchen window. So let us do branch 1 together, start to finish, and then the other 2 are simply the same dance repeated. Kneel down at the plant with a clean, sharp knife in your pocket, a trowel, a landscape staple or a fist-sized rock, and a watering can. Take your first chosen branch and lay it gently out along the ground toward the open soil, and find the section of stem that naturally touches down. That contact zone, usually a hand's width of stem somewhere in the branch's middle, is where everything happens. Strip the leaves from that section if it carries any, a quick pull between finger and thumb, so bare stem meets bare earth. Now turn that section of branch over in your fingers and look at the underside, the face that will press against the soil. This is where the wound goes. With the knife blade held almost flat, or honestly, with nothing more than a fingernail if the bark is thin, scrape away a shallow strip of bark along that underside. You are not carving, and you are not cutting into the wood. You are scraping, the way you would scrape a bit of dried paint off glass, just until the color changes and a greenish-white layer shows through under the gray. That pale green layer is the living tissue where the root cells live, and exposing it is the invitation. A strip about the length of your thumb is plenty. Shallow wound, never a deep cut. If you find yourself sawing, stop. The branch still has to carry water to its green tip the whole time it is rooting, and a branch cut half through cannot do that job. For the same reason, never peel the bark all the way around the stem. A full ring severs the branch's plumbing and kills everything beyond it, so the wound stays on the underside only, one face of the stem lengthwise. And if you happen to keep a jar of rooting hormone powder in the shed, a light dusting over the fresh wound can nudge the roots along, though the gardeners who worked out this method centuries ago never had any, so treat it as strictly optional. Loosen the soil where the wounded section will lie, a few turns of the trowel breaking up the crust, working the top few inches into a soft crumb. If your ground is heavy clay, work a couple of handfuls of coarse sand or gritty compost into that little patch, because lavender roots, even brand new baby ones, sulk in a wet, sticky seat. Then press the wounded underside of the branch down into that loosened soil firmly, so pale wound and moist earth are in full contact. The branch will try to spring back up. They always do, so pin it. A metal landscape staple pushed down over the stem is the tidy answer, 2 cross sticks jabbed into the ground. Work fine, and the oldest solution in gardening, a good, heavy rock set right on top of the buried section, has probably rooted more lavender across the centuries than everything else combined. Whatever holds that wound against the soil without crushing the stem. Cover the pin section with an inch or two of soil, tucked in and firmed with your palm. And this is the part people get wrong, so look at it carefully. The green growing tip of the branch stays out, above ground in the light, pointing at the sky, because everything this branch is about to become depends on that tuft of green. You bury the middle. You never bury the tip. When you stand back, what you should see is a branch that dives underground for a hand's width and surfaces again as a little green fountain a few inches beyond. Water that's spot in. A slow, gentle soak from the can, and make yourself a promise to keep that one patch consistently moist from here on. Not the whole plant. Established lavender famously hates wet feet, and you will keep treating the mother as the dry country shrub she is. Just the small buried zone where the new roots are being asked to form. Moist, not swamped through the growing season. That is branch 1. Now branch 2, on the far side of the crown. Same hunt for the touchdown point. Same stripped leaves. Same fingernail scrape to the greenish white. Same loosened soil. Same pin. Same buried middle and free green tip. Same watering in. Then branch 3. By the time you finish the third one, the whole job has taken you less than an hour, and your old driftwood lavender is standing in the middle of its own nursery, 3 branches diving into the earth around it like the arms of an octopus, each one secretly turning into a new plant. One rescue fully mapped. The Flower Gardener's Bible covers 38 flowering plants the same way. $9 at bloomrelay.co, the URL on the book cover. Back to the bed, because now comes the part of this method nobody can shortcut, and I would rather tell you straight than have you out there in 3 weeks poking at the soil in disappointment. The waiting, rooting under a layer, is slow, and it is variable, and both of those are the nature of old wood. In a warm growing season, the first white roots can form in a matter of weeks. On a tired old branch in a cool summer, it can take months. And first roots are only the beginning of the story. The sources I trust most on old woody lavender, the people who renew whole fields this way, put full independence, a layer rooted strongly enough to live entirely on its own, at 1 to 3 years. Sit with that timeline for a moment before you commit, because it is the true price of the method. Nothing about ground layering is fast. Everything about it is nearly free. That is the trade, and you should walk into it with your eyes open. The good news is that the waiting asks very little of you. Keep the 3 buried patches moist through the growing season. Do not let the layered branches flower, Pinch off any bloom spikes they try to throw, because every ounce of energy that goes into a purple flower is an ounce not going into white roots underground. And once a month, not once a day, give each layer the test, the gentle tug. Take the branch just beyond the buried section between two fingers and pull upward, softly, the way you would test whether a tooth is loose. If the branch lifts freely, no roots yet, tuck it back in, firm the soil, walk away for another month. If it resists, if the earth holds it like a handshake, there are roots down there gripping the soil, and your layer is on its way. The first time you feel that resistance on a branch you buried yourself, on a plant you had written off as driftwood, is a genuinely lovely moment in a gardening life. I have felt it dozens of times over 30 years, and it has not worn thin yet. Which brings us to graduation day, somewhere down that 1 to 3 year road. A layer is ready to graduate when two things are true at once. The tug test meets firm resistance, real anchorage, not a maybe. And the green tit is visibly pushing new top growth of its own, fresh grey-green foliage it did not have last season, proof the little root system underneath is not just present, but earning its keep. When you see both, it is time to sever the umbilical. Take your clean, sharp pruners to the stretch of branch between the mother plant and the buried, rooted section and cut it through. One snip. The moment you make that cut, the youngster stops being a branch and becomes a lavender plant in its own right, standing on its own roots in your bed. And then you have a pleasant choice. You can leave the young plant growing exactly where it rooted, which is the gentlest path since it is already established in that spot and never has to feel a shovel at all. Or, if the geometry of the bed wants rearranging, you can lift it, a generous root ball, plenty of soil held around those young roots, and move it to a better position. Do any lifting in fall or early spring in the cool seasons when the plant is resting, never in the heat of a blooming summer. Set the youngster at the same depth it grew, firm the soil around the root ball with your hands, and give it an occasional drink through its first season in the new spot, while those roots knit into fresh ground. After that, it is lavender, and lavender would rather you left it alone. 3 layers taken all the way through to that graduation can refurnish the entire planting. Where one grey skeleton stood, 3 young silver plants, arranged exactly where you want them. Meanwhile, of course, the mother plant is still there, at the center of all this, and for a year or 2, possibly 3, she is going to be part of your view. So the next job is keeping her decent while her replacements grow, because a bed that looks abandoned for 2 years is a price nobody should pay. The safe rule you already know is now your grooming rule. Trim only into green growth, never into bare wood. Every year, right after the flowers fade in summer, shear the green fringe back by about 1/3, shaping what canopy she still has into the tidiest mound the old framework allows. Deadhead the spent purple spikes. She will not grow young again, we have established that honestly, but a groomed old lavender with clean lines and a fresh haircut reads as character in a border. An ungroomed one reads as neglect. The difference is 20 minutes a year with the shears. And if you want to go further, there is a slower game you can play with the old girl herself, the staged approach professional gardeners use when they attempt true rejuvenation on woody lavender. Instead of ever cutting the whole plant back at once, which strips away all the green and collapses the plant, the same fatal mistake I made on that hedge 30 years ago, you divide her woody stems mentally into 3 or 4 groups. 1 year, you cut back only the first group, hard, and leave the rest of the canopy untouched to keep feeding the roots. The next year, the second group. The year after, the third. Spread over successive growing seasons like that, the plant always keeps most of her green engine running, while one section at a time is asked to push new shoots low down. It sometimes works. It sometimes half works. It sometimes works. Consider it strictly optional extra credit, because with 3 clones already rooting around her feet, the mother's only required job now is to stay alive and keep feeding those layers. Her retirement date has become entirely your choice, not an emergency. Now, while we are out here with a clean knife and dirt on our knees anyway, one more move, and think of it as stacking the odds. Take a handful of cuttings the same day you set your layers. Snip several short lengths of the healthiest newer growth the plant offers. finger-length pieces of this season's stems that are still green and flexible. Strip the lower leaves and stand them an inch deep in a pot of damp sandy mix on a bright windowsill or in a shaded cold frame. Cuttings taken from an old woody plant are less certain than layers for the reason we already covered. Plenty will wilt and fail, but they cost you nothing beyond 5 minutes in a flower pot, and every one that roots is another true clone of your plant in the bank. Layers in the ground, cuttings on the sill, belt and braces. When those young plants, layers and cuttings alike, are finally growing on their own, I want to hand you the one habit that decides their entire future, because otherwise we will be having this same conversation about them in 8 years. Lavender goes woody for one reason, above all others. It goes unpruned. Every year a lavender is left uncut, the green zone migrates a little further out along the stems, and the bare grey zone at the base grows a little longer, and that march only ever goes one direction. So from their first full year in the ground, your young plants get a proper annual cut. After flowering each summer, shear them back into the green growth, taking roughly a third, always stopping above the lowest leaves, never touching bare wood. That single yearly habit keeps a lavender dense, mounded, and silver from the ground up. Gardeners in colder regions often add a second, lighter pass in mid-spring, just tidying away winter-burned tips once new growth shows, and the plants are the better for it. It is the difference between a plant that is still beautiful at 15 years and one that has turned to driftwood by 8. The mother taught you that lesson the hard way. Let her grandchildren inherit only the easy version. Before the summing up, the honest ledger, because I promised you straight talk, and a method is only as trustworthy as its stated odds. Ground layering old lavender succeeds about half the time per branch. Half. Some layers root beautifully, some sit a full season and do nothing, and a few simply die back, and you will not know in advance which is which. Which is precisely why this method begins with 3 branches and not 1, and why I will not apologize for the redundancy. Run all 3 through to the end, and the practitioners who use this method count on 3 or 4 new plants per mother over the life of the exercise, which is the refurnished planting we are after. The timeline is 1 to 3 years from scrape to independence. The mother plant will never be young again, no matter what you do, because bare wood does not resprout, and no video, mine included, changes that biology. And if what you actually want is a transformed bed this season, purple and full by July, then the honest advice is the boring advice. Drive to the nursery, buy new plants, skip the sentiment entirely, and enjoy your summer. There is no shame in that door. It is just not the door for the plant you refuse to give up on. Because what layering genuinely delivers for the cost of a knife scrape, a rock, and patience is something no nursery can sell you at any price. The same beloved plant continuing itself, free, true to type, down to the last note of that scent, and already home, rooted in the exact soil where it will live out its next 15 years. So here is the picture I want to leave you with, the one that keeps gardeners like us going through the slow parts. 2 summers from now, you walk down that same front path in early July, where the driftwood stood. 3 young silver mounds are blooming in a row dense from the ground up, humming with the same bees. You brush your hand across the nearest one out of old habit, and there it is on your fingers. Not a scent like the old plants. The old plant scent, exactly, carried forward by 3 youngsters that grew from her own arms because you knelt down one afternoon with a knife and refused to dig her out. If you want more rescues like this one, for the plants everybody else has given up on, subscribe, because that is exactly the gardening I make these videos for.